All right, so hi guys, welcome back. So for this video, we're going to be discussing more on Module 2 about process design, capacity planning, and supply chain management. So hopefully, strategy and how you're supposed to form it in a business context is a lot clearer now, especially when it comes to entering markets that are relatively new or that haven't really been explored yet. So in today's video, it's all about, okay, now that we have a strategy, now that we know what we're supposed to be doing, it's all about how and actually how are we going to do this concretely, how are we going to do this practically. So this is what we'll be discussing in process design. Okay, just share my screen. Process design. Okay, yon. Okay, just go back here. Okay, so process design, capacity planning, and supply chain management. Oops, so process design. So first, let's have a few definitions. What is a process? So process basically is the series of steps involved in transforming inputs into outputs. So it's fairly simple, very straightforward. So why should we study process design? Why is it important in business, and why is it important basically in our lives? So a lot of things in our life are made up of different processes, and by knowing how to effectively design and improve these processes, we can also ultimately improve our lives. So okay, so let me just go a little bit deeper on this concept. So the first part on theory here is that life is made up of a bunch of different processes. Okay, so our daily routines, learning new skills, learning how to navigate through the world. It's all a process. It's all about taking a series of steps ultimately for an outcome, for a desired outcome. The next parang theory is that any process ultimately can be improved in a few aspects. Namely, you can make that process cost cheaper, so less inputs needed for the same number of outputs. You can make it faster. You can make it have better quality and a lot of different other factors. So if we take these two things as truth, then a corollary that comes up from these two is that life can always be improved. Diba? So life made up of processes, any process can be improved, meaning life can always be improved. So I think this thought is very comforting in the sense that we know now we always have that power to focus on what we can change and how we can actually change it to make our lives better. So parang hopefully that it kind of makes you think, and that makes you a little bit more interested in actually learning about process design and learning about, well, operations management in general. So now that we have definitions out of the way, let's go on to the next part of the lesson. All right, process design. Okay, so process design. So basically, what we need here is, okay, now that you have your product designed, you know the features that your product needs. It's all about, okay, how do we create the operations, the steps necessary in order to turn from raw materials into that finished product that you will be selling in the market, selling online, selling in stores, etc., etc. So here are a few fairly easy to follow steps on how you can actually go about doing that. So the first step is breaking down your product or service into its component parts, and basically just keep deconstructing, keep going to that, finding the components that kind of make up that part and that product until you have the core components, basically where you can't disassemble it any further. All right, so now for each of those parts, identify the process or the process used to transform it into a component part that will eventually be assembled into a bigger part and ultimately until it becomes assembled to the final product. Next is organize the process into an easy to understand flowchart. So I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before. Operations, namely from my experience, is all about having a lot of flowcharts, a lot of diagrams, a lot of visual aids trying to explain how it's supposed to happen on a step-by-step basis. All right, so fairly simple, just 3 steps. So with regards to your paper, uh, Module 1 was all about designing your product, getting the right features, what it's supposed to look like, how big it is, what color it's supposed to be, what's the packaging going to be like. Now, for this module, for process design, it's all about going a little bit deeper and actually finding out how we're supposed to make it, how we're supposed to construct and assemble it. All right. Okay. So as I mentioned before, flowcharts are very, very important and very crucial in operations and process design. So let's go through a little bit of the types of flowcharts. Okay, so we have a process flowchart. So a drawing used to analyze movement of people or materials. It's just basically, okay, uh, sabihin natin, a morning routine, you can make a process flowchart, wake up, step 1, wake up. Step 2, turn off alarm. Step 3, get out of bed. Step 4, take a shower. Step 5, brush your teeth. Then etc. etc. So basically, a flowchart is basically the most simple form of flowchart that we have on this list. Okay, so here are some very important flowchart symbols that you guys have to remember. Okay, let me just make this full screen. All right, flowchart symbols. So very quickly, some of the most important ones are uh, this one, the rectangle one, the process. So it's an activity. Your terminal, so it's supposed to signal when the process starts and when the process stops. Next is decision. So a decision is also very useful. It's also very common in flowchart making. So it's supposed to tell you whether a decision point is to be made in that specific part of the process. Another very important, very common shape is predefined process. So this is useful when the process is a little bit more complicated. So basically, if you have a flow chart and that flow chart is going to be used inside another bigger, more complicated flow chart, you can use this predefined process as that symbol. And of course, you have your flow lines that just connects your different shapes to each other. All right. So another type of flow chart basically is just adding another element to your process flow chart is called a swim lane diagram. So what a swim lane diagram does is that it adds a layer of who is responsible for the action in that specific process diagram. For example, for an order taking process, you could have different, maybe like 3 types of swim lanes. So the first one being the actions the customer take, the actions maybe the cashier takes, and then finally the actions like the actual operations take. So maybe in a fast food setting, so you have your customer, your cashier, and then maybe the cook and the kitchen. So swim lane diagram. So it's kind of just adds more information to one diagram so that when you look at it, when you look at the visual, you're able to understand it a little bit better. You're able to understand how everything happens and how everything flows a little bit better. So yeah, swim lane diagram, very common in operations. Next is time function mapping. So time function mapping is basically adding a time element to your swim lane diagram. So as you can see here in this example, these rows are actually swim lanes. So you have your customer, sales, plant A, plant B, etc. And then your so this is your y-axis, and your x-axis is your time. So how long that specific process takes. Very important, especially when you're trying to find your bottleneck, when you're trying to find the areas of improvement for that specific process. Next, you have value stream mapping. So value stream mapping is also adding another additional element to your what's that called? Time function map. So basically, it's just adding, okay, which of these processes are actually value adding and which are considered to be waste. So waiting time, transport time, motion, these are all wastes that you can diagram using a value stream map. So this is basically the most comprehensive out of all the 3. So para siyang ano eh, nagle-level up, para siyang nag-evolve. So process map, from a process map, swim lane diagram, and then becomes you can create a time function map and then a value stream map. So it's kind of like leveling up in a way. And you have, okay, instructional flowcharts. So these are the types of flowcharts that are used to relay or communicate instruction to the people who will actually be doing them. So it's very useful when you need for training new employees. It's also very useful for knowledge management, so that people are able to track, okay, what tracker do I use, what information system do I have to input the information in. So instruction of flowcharts. I have a little bit of an example here. So I'm not going to go too in depth on this one, but to keep the video a little bit shorter, but you can check this out. I used a program called Draw.io to actually make this. Later on, there's going to be a primer on that, so you can check that out. All right, so process design example. Okay, so remember, let me just, before I go through the example, let me just briefly come back to the process design methodology that I got, that I want you guys to learn. So it's all about breaking down the product, identifying the process for each of those products, and then organizing that process, in an easy to understand flowchart. Okay, so yeah, just keep that in mind as I go through this example. So design a process to create this product. So what is this product? So it's an acrylic Spotify code engraved on, it's a Spotify code engraved on an acrylic keychain. So I think I actually have an example. Wala na kasi ako maisip na example, so I just use this. So here you go, if you guys can see. It's made out of acrylic and it was engraved on a laser engraver. So yeah, so it makes make things a little bit easier. Okay, so step one, it's breaking down the product and its component parts. So okay, what are the products here? So the first one is the keychain itself. So basically, this part right here, the metal part, that's one part. Another one is the acrylic itself. So this basically comes in sheets. That's why it's kind of weird here. So it's an acrylic sheet, and then finally the design of it, the acrylic, the Spotify code to be engraved on that specific item. Okay, that's step one. So once we've identified, okay, these are the things or the parts of the product that I need to build, it's all about, okay, going to step two. So okay, materials used, acrylic, and then metal wires to kind of create that keychain itself. Okay, so step two, identify the process to transform these raw materials into the final product. So okay, so raw materials here are your acrylic sheets and then your metal wires. And the machines that you will be using is, number one, I think it's called a metal bending machine. So that's what makes it from parang metal wire into the circular keychain holder thing. And then you have a laser engraver that will cut your acrylic sheet into the specified size. Okay. So step three is all about designing that process. So okay, let's kind of break that down first. So first, let's go with acrylic, the keychain itself, or the acrylic body. So first, so syempre malaki yung sheet. You have to kind of cut just a tiny piece of it. So you'll use a laser cutter for that. So here, okay, let me just try to make this a little bit bigger so it's more visible. Okay. Loading. Okay, sorry. Okay, there we go. Okay, so acrylic keychain. So the body itself. So it starts out with an acrylic sheet, and then you place that acrylic sheet on the laser cutter / engraver. So here's the machine, and then you engrave the Spotify code, and then you cut out the keychain into that small rectangular shape, and then assembly. All right, so let's go to the next one first. So the Spotify code. First, you have to choose your song. Next is you generate that specific Spotify code. You can just look this up on the internet. Spotify code generator. It's pretty easy to look up. Any song, even a playlist, can actually be generated, and a Spotify code can be generated for that. Next is you have to create this layout for the laser machine to understand, and then you use this to engrave on that laser engraving machine. Okay. Next part is your keychain ring. So from that metal thread, you feed it into the ring making machine, which is this one. And then basically, so from a long piece of metal, you it gets cut and it gets parang rolled, I think is what you would call it. So magiging final output is going to look like that. Final output for the laser is going to look like this. And then after that, it gets assembled into the keychain ring. And then boom, you have your Spotify code keychain. That's basically the end of that process. Okay, so a little bit of an exercise here for you guys to try out yourself. So there's an assignment in this module for you guys to try it out yourself. So we have the product to be designed, the pro the process to be designed is for this specific product, which is a graphic t-shirt. So it's fairly easy, it's fairly straightforward. You can look up how a t-shirt is actually made and how it's actually printed on. So yeah. Okay. So I'll just end it here para the video is not too long. And then next up, we'll be talking about measuring the performance of your process. All right.